The Taxpayer Protection Act is an initiative supported by taxpayer groups and the business community to restore some of the protections that have been lost in that were provided to us by Proposition 13. Proposition 13, of course, was the iconic initiative back in 1978 that reduced property taxes very significantly in the state of California. Ever since 1978, the courts have created loopholes in Proposition 13, and the legislature has as well. So we've been involved in a number of subsequent initiatives. We did it in 1986, we did it in 1996, and other initiatives to close some of the loopholes in Proposition 13 to give taxpayers more protection. The Taxpayer Protection Act, which is slated to be on the November ballot, would require a statewide vote of any statewide tax increase. It also closes one of the loopholes in Proposition 13 that was created in a court decision known as the Upland decision that weakened the two-thirds vote for special taxes. It also has very stringent accountability and transparency requirements, requiring that if there is a tax increase on the ballot, it must disclose the amount of the tax, the duration, and how much money they intend to generate. So there's a lot of good things in the Taxpayer Protection Act, and it polls very well, which is why I think our adversaries are nervous about it. And part of their nervousness resulted in the filing of a lawsuit directly in the California Supreme Court seeking to take the Taxpayer Protection Act off the ballot entirely. This was a very unusual request, bypassing all the lower courts, going directly to the California Supreme Court. All the briefing had been completed, and a couple weeks ago, we had the court hearing in San Francisco with the 7 justices of the California Supreme Court. We will not have a decision until June 27th, which is when the Secretary of State must have a final ruling in order to prepare the ballot material. How did it go? I think it went pretty well for our side. I'm always hesitant to predict how a court case will resolve. We don't know, but I was encouraged by how active the justices were in pressing both sides, and I thought our side had the much better answers. The other side had to assert a relatively frivolous argument that this particular initiative went too far and actually constituted a complete revision of the Constitution. I don't think the majority of the justices were buying that argument. The opponents have made it clear that the Taxpayer Protection Act would prevent them from raising taxes whenever they want, to which we respond, yes, that's right, and we need that, because right now, California is one of the highest tax states in America. We have the highest income tax rate by far in the United States. We have the highest state sales tax rate. We have the highest gas tax, of course. And even with Proposition 13, we rank 19th out of 50 states in per capita property tax collections. The tax burden in California is crushing middle income people. It's forcing wealthy to leave. Businesses are picking up stakes and moving to other states, and has resulted in California having the highest unemployment rate in the United States, because our policy leaders are committing economic suicide, and this has got to stop. So the Taxpayer Protection Act is needed, and any argument asserted by our adversaries is not compelling at all, and we certainly don't think the voters will find their arguments compelling. Another argument they assert is that it would make it more difficult to raise a variety of fees. They'd say it would be impossible to raise fees that are not technically taxes, but that is not true. The fees can still be imposed. However, the Taxpayer Protection Act does require that any fee that is imposed on a fee payer not exceed the cost of the service or regulation being provided to that fee payer. So anywhere, in other words, there is a prohibition in the Taxpayer Protection Act that a fee could be used to generate general fund revenue. A water rate, for example, should be used exclusively to support the water system. Same with electric rates, and same with any fee related to providing some service to the people paying the fee. it shouldn't generate more revenue than they need. So that is another important point that we respond when they argue that it makes it impossible to raise fees. No, it doesn't. As long as you justify the amount of the fee, you can increase fees. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm cautiously optimistic that the voters of the state of California will, in fact, have an opportunity to vote on the Taxpayer Protection Act this November. One other point, in addition to the lawsuit itself, as an indication of how nervous they are about the chances of the Taxpayer Protection Act passing, because quite frankly, I think they've seen the same polling we have, that if it is on the ballot, it will probably pass. But they have submitted countermeasures, one of them which is a direct attack on Proposition 13, called Assembly Constitutional Amendment Number 1. It does not have a proposition number yet. We won't know that until June if it stays on the ballot. It really guts the taxpayer protections directly in Proposition 13. Because Proposition 13 is so popular in the state of California, I don't think Californians are going to vote for that particular initiative. I think they put it on the ballot to try to confuse voters, but I'm not sure that's going to work either. The other attack on the Taxpayer Protection Act was kind of a convoluted proposal that would require any measure that's on the ballot that seeks to impose any vote threshold higher than a simple majority vote for tax increases must pass by that same margin in a statewide election. If that sounds confusing, it is, and I think one of the reasons it will go down to defeat is that people will find it confusing. It would, in essence, invalidate the Taxpayer Protection Act even before the Taxpayer Protection Act took effect. So even if it got a simple majority vote in the Taxpayer Protection Act, this other measure could potentially nullify or neutralize the effectiveness of the Taxpayer Protection Act. Again, I think this is one of these cases where, first of all, I think it takes our adversaries at least 30 seconds to describe what this ACA 13 does. And secondly, I think voters will view it as something as a little bit tricky, something instead of attacking the Taxpayer Protection Act directly, they've put something on the ballot to seek to neutralize it. You know, wouldn't they be better off just opposing the Taxpayer Protection Act, which they will do? But again, because of the polling and because the Taxpayer Protection Act is so popular, I think they're trying all these kind of side tricks to try to prevent the Taxpayer Protection Act from taking effect. When the Taxpayer Protection Act passes, it will provide substantial new protections for California taxpayers, the chief among which is the requirement for a vote on any statewide tax increase. Because right now, under Proposition 13, in order for the state to impose a tax increase, it takes a 2/3 vote of each house. But now, because the legislature is dominated by very, very liberal interests, they are able to get that 2/3 vote, and they did so with the gas tax, the dreaded the gas tax, which is so unpopular in the state of California. Had the Taxpayer Protection Act been in effect at the time they passed the increase in the gas tax, that would have gone to the voters. And they know very well that the voters of the state of California would have rejected an increase in the gas tax. So having the right to vote on any statewide tax increase by the statewide electorate is very important. The other thing I think that whether one is liberal or conservative, they should enjoy, and that is the transparency provisions, which would require that if there's any tax or fee increase on the ballot, that it specify in legally enforceable language the amount of the tax, the rate, and how much they intend to generate, how much money they intend to generate from that tax proposal. So that's nothing more than truth in advertising. And then there's another provision that prevents the government from delegating the taxing power to unelected administrative agencies. Right now, we have these mega agencies in Sacramento, State Water Resources Control Board, the Air Quality Board, many massive agencies, and they are given very broad discretion in setting whatever rates or fees or taxes they want. This would require that any fee or tax increase has to be approved by some body that is elected directly by the people. So this is the accountability part of the Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act, and that is the taxing power can no longer be delegated to an administrative agency.
If you haven't checked out CaliforniaInsider.com, we highly recommend you do that now because we're going to have a lot of news and videos there. And on top of what we have there right now, we are building a really big platform to cover what's happening in California so you can be informed. We're going to have more shows, more videos from all aspects of life in California. Go to CaliforniaInsider.com and we'll see you there.